boy. Blood Talents has changed. No more regrowths to buff your sorry ass damage. That, plus a bunch of abilities baseline like Iron Fur and Cyclone, are finally bringing back the Druid feel to Feral. No more just biting and shredding. Now we can bardskin and be more tanky and a lot more unpruned goodness to explore, so stay tuned! Stay tuned to our stream as well, twitch.tv/Marcelian Online, and catch us do keys and raids with viewers, or test other specs in Shadowlands while waiting for hour-long queues and talking about feral buffs. Bardskin is one of the first abilities to come back to Feral in the unpruning movement. In the exchange, Survival Instincts has been nerfed to not have charges anymore and the 3-minute cooldown. And this opens the discussion of survivability. With the live version of defensives, you would have a 6-second 50% damage reduction every minute, if we assume a consistent use. So with the 2 charges on a 2-minute cooldown, you would rotate them every minute while keeping them on cooldown all the time. Now Bardskin is a 1-minute cooldown with 20% damage reduction for 12 seconds. 12 seconds is a very large chunk of time for a defensive cooldown. Granted, the amount is reduced, so you have this every minute, and let's say less impactful BFA tankiness, and also have Survival Instincts every 3 minutes for the big deaths. That's arguably more overall tankiness than before. What's even better is that you can now pair these up if something really big is about to hit you, whereas before you couldn't stack charges of Survival Instincts. Having your tankiness baked into 2 abilities offers a bit more freedom of choice as to what you want to mitigate with what ability. I'm all for this change. To go hand in hand with the defensives, Iron Fur is also baseline, aka not needing Guardian Affinity anymore. When you look at this, you think of warriors and paladins being able to equip a shield and use their mitigation regardless of their spec. This should tell you that hybrid classes can actually play their hybrid roles without sacrificing talent traces. So you can always swap to bear if shit hits the fan and take over from your tank for a little bit. Likely this won't happen very often, but it doesn't have to make you feel you are the druid first and not just a cat. This is the purpose of unpruning. Same thing with Cyclo. This baseline can have some interesting implications that we haven't had the chance to test yet. In PvE, this could be an amazing addition if we can clone a mob to prevent it from getting bolstered as we are killing the others in the pack. And you can apply the bolster situation to, I don't know, other buffs and effects. And of course, this ties into Blizzard and how they will allow us to do this, or if. Utility being used to counter detrimental events seems like a no-brainer and would give Feral more bang for its buck. There are stars and toilets when it comes to Covenant class abilities, basic Covenant abilities aside. Convoke the Spirits comes from the Night Fae, and it's a ridiculous ability that looks and sounds better than it actually performs. It casts 16! You hear that? 16 druid spells on a 4-second channel, and you probably already heard the problem. Channel. Yup, this is a legit old school channel that breaks upon doing anything other than taking your hands off the keyboard. In a world where melee DPSers have to move a lot, this sounds like a pain in the butt to optimize, and it is. That aside, the 16 druid spells are all chosen random from a select few that come from each spec. There is an innate priority system that chooses the ones that belong to Feral over others, and the Feral ones generate combo points at least. The randomness is fine, I guess, although you would clearly like more of the Feral ones to be casted if possible. The one major issue I have with this is it doesn't work with the new iteration of the Blood Talents talent. Blood Talents talent, like the Ring of Death, Blood Talents talent. And we will get to that in a bit on the Blood Talents. The Venter gives you Ravenous Frenzy as a 3-minute cooldown buff for 20 seconds. When you cast Druid spells, you receive a damage, healing, and haste buff for 2% stacking. Currently, there is no limit to how much you can stack it, but if you are idle for 1.5 seconds or more, you get stunned for 1 second and lose 3% of your max HP per stack accumulated, with the buff dropping as well. The downside does not count when you decurse somebody or get CC'd, it seems, which is a major plus. Outside of that, it really doesn't matter too much. The only real issue you will have is with the innate downtime the spec can have or wants you to have, so you can pull energy. That can really hurt, but it's something you can plan around, adding a degree of skill towards optimizing this ability. And to be honest, this is a much cooler cooldown to have than Berserk. And funny enough, it seems like what Berserk should be, instead of the bland energy buff iteration it currently is under. Going with the Kyrian aka Bastion Covenant, you will get Kindred Spirits, which might have been the most anticipated one, coupled with the biggest disappointment. We all hoped this could be the old Symbiosis, when in exchange it's just a glorified stat buff, at least for Feral Imbalance. The way this is supposed to work is you make a bond with an ally in your group and each of you gets a buff based on each other's role. Ideally, you want the DPS increase buff, since this is what World of Warcraft is and has been for years. Hence, as a DPSer, you would target a DPS ally when each of you deals X amount of damage, and the other would get a mediocre amount of primary stat. That's it in terms of DPS output. It could get a bit interesting with tanks and healers, but at that point it's just defensive powers. To be honest, having healing redirected to you from your healer or damage received redirected to your tank is potentially very useful, but that depends on the content and your usage of decent defensive cooldowns and the constant free regrowths. So essentially, this ability either gives you the most boring stat buff effect or more of the things you can already do that either compensates for the difficulty of the content that sees you not surviving, highly unlikely, or your mistakes. At which point we argued that mistakes cause you to lose the DPS aspect of this ability, since you have to switch it to your tank or healer. Like, really? In very high-end Mythic Plus, this could be something you could sue for your healer, since transferring damage to your tank is hardly ever ideal. But that one is niche in a sea of encounters and events that the game offers. Maybe PvP then? Who knows? Lastly, Adaptive Swarm comes from the Necrolords and is an interesting one, far better than Kindred Spirits. What it does is that it applies a dot or a hot and deals damage or heals and increases the damage of your hots or healing of your hots. And this is a beautiful poem written by yours truly, Flame, who's over there. Say hello, motherfucker.
Hey, what up, yo?
Yeah, let's carry on. It clearly affects enemies and allies, and that's not all. It has a 25-second cooldown, not 3 minutes. It lasts for 12 seconds, then jumps on another target, alternating up to 3 times between allies and enemies. The healing part is a bit lackluster, since you don't really have a way to trigger it outside the free regrowths, unless you swap out of cat form to cast rejuvenations. The damage bit is good actually, and works towards the fantasy of Feral getting most of its damage from bleeds. This would be nice to be tested in group content like dungeons, but until then, leveling and torghast is the most we could do right now. When Mythic Plus comes out and even the raids, we could grasp the full power of all the Covenant abilities, and most likely all of this will be public in the Dream Growth Discord community, where people like Guilty Ass are already testing stuff and posting articles. Go check them out. Unfortunately, Feral hasn't received a lot of changes to talents, although the few that came are actually pretty nice. It's no secret Feral needs a lot of love, a lot of it. And looking at what Blizz did with warriors and shamans, I won't be surprised if they add an alpha build that swaps the entire spec around and make this video worthless. On one hand, yay for Ferals! On the other hand, fuck our lives. But enough about that. The first 2 rows remain unchanged, aka Sabertooth will own the zone most likely for another expansion. The affinity row, however, has received some tweaks. Now, all options offer actual utility besides their respective basic spells. Balance now gives Typhoon. As far as class fantasy goes, I'm all for this. The Affinity Bro felt most of the game like a glorified passive outside Resto where you would actually find uses for Swiftmans. Having Typhoon makes the choice more impactful for sure, but it now means we need to get Balance Affinity for Typhoon, whereas before we could get it without. Although, to be fair, Balanced Affinity has been the default choice for a long time because of the, extra range on your cat abilities. And speaking of Resto, the Affinity now comes with Ursol's Vortex. Ha! You could argue that this plays into the unpruning movement, but either way, yay for Ursol and having a better reason to pick Resto Affinity. Ursol Vortex is, first of all, an amazing utility that can help, mostly in dungeons, your tank to kite, helps grouping mobs more tightly and things. Since it shares the role with Typhoon, we can say bye-bye to the Typhoon plus Ursol combo, which to be fair, Feral didn't have anyway. Lastly, Guardian Affinity comes with Incapacitating Roar, which is the costlier of the options. You can cast it from cat form but shifts you into bear automatically, meaning you need to manually shift into cat back after you casted it. This essentially puts a 2 GCD's cost to it as opposed to Typhoon and Ursol, which can be cast from cat without shifting out of it. This doesn't make a lot of design sense. Either make all of them swap you out, or ideally none of them swap you out of the cat form. Especially in a modern World of Warcraft where the combat is very fast-paced and Feral is or will be in the endgame a very fast-paced spec. Outside of that, the ability is nice clearly. Stops casts, channels, and everything that usually cannot be interrupted or silenced. A lot of utility to be gained from it on a very short cooldown of 30 seconds. Now, to replace Typhoon down the road, we have an oldie but goldie. Heart of the Wild! Brings back memories, doesn't it? Now, the current iteration is a 5-minute cooldown. Hot damn, 5 minutes! That empowers your chosen affinity. Nice to see some synergy, right? For Balance Affinity, it gives a 30% damage increase to its respective abilities and makes Star Surge instant. For Guardian, you take 20% more stamina, overlapping Iron Fist and a second charge of Frenzy Regen. Lastly, for Resto, it increases the healing by 30% and mana cost is reduced by 50%. On paper, the utility is huge and this lasts for 45 seconds. For 45 seconds, you could be an almost boomkin, almost bear, and almost tree. It's really nothing to scoff at, since this is actually what makes druids and what I personally loved about the class back 14 years ago. The numbers will need to be tested in proper content, however, since right now an empowered Star Surge deals as much damage as a 4 combo point bite. The Resto Affinity effect also applies to the free regrowths you cast while in cat form, at least the bonus healing does. So the uses of this can be either limitless or not at all based on how they balanced it when mythics and raids come out. And lastly, Blood Talents. Personally, I did not mind the BFA one, simply because it gave me something other to do and manage besides, building combo points and spending them on bites. It was a bit awkward to have the heal as a trigger for the buff, and it's sad that the reason it was fun is because there was not much fun to be had elsewhere. It's like being the top DPS in an LFR group. Now I think it's in a much better state. Now it activates after you have casted Rake, Shred, and Thrash within 3 seconds of each other in no particular order. You can even weave in other abilities if your haste and energy permits. Once you trigger it, it stays as a 2-charge buff on you for 30 seconds and increases the damage of your Bite, Rip, and Primal Wrath by 30%. The fact that it lasts a while fits in nicely with the downtime you will have. Mostly you will have it intentionally since you need to pull energy for this to be able to fit in all of the casts within that short window. Clear casting, however, does help a lot. And with that, we mentioned downtime again. I'm not a fan of downtime and I felt forced to pull energy for it, but I am a fan of planning ahead and strategic thinking and decision making. So it's hard to balance these concepts. At the end of the day, Feral is too bland of a spec right now, a bit of a ghost. Even with all of these additions, I don't know, at least compared to other specs. Anything that forces you to make decisions in your rotation is a welcome addition, so it would be hard to play without Blood Talents, but not hard without Sabertooth. Feral needs more things to manage. Make bleeds matter more, or give us another bleed to manage, or combine something with Rake and Rip. There are multiple ways to improve the spec. I would like to see Convoke the Spirits being able to be channeled on the move, and or let us weave in finishers to consume the potential large amount of combo points we might generate, without breaking the channel, of course. Maybe make the DPS version of Kindred Spirits give you a stacking buff that empowers your next combo point consuming ability like Bite or Rip, that can create Rip snapshots or bigger and more meaningful bites. The community is filled with hungry cats, hungry for more than what we currently have on the alpha, and I strongly recommend you go check them out in the Dreamgrove Discord community. You will find Guilty As there, who already published a Wowhead article about Feral and does podcasts talking about cats. Link is in the description. And also in the description you'll find links to our Patreon, our Teespring merch store, our twitch.tv/Marcelian Online stream thingy. Everything is all there, and I do want to mention all of our lovely Patreons who keep on supporting us month by month, and it's clear now that without your support, much of this would not be possible. And just in case you're interested on becoming a Patreon and wanting to know what you're going to be supporting, there's obviously two Shadowlands class overviews on a weekly basis, that plus the on cooldown weekly WoW News show, which we post on Friday. On top of that, there's all the streams. I think we have 5 streams by now, where you can join Flame playing dungeons and raids and whatnot. Sometimes I join as well. And also we have a brand new project that is currently in the works. I cannot spoil it for you yet, but it's gonna be super awesome. More details on that in about a month from now. So once again, Patreons, thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you for watching the video, and also thank Flame for this wonderful script he wrote and I just read, because I want to launch off my acting career. Say hello, Flame.
Hey, what up?
All right, have a good one, guys. See you next time.